Hi, this is Dr. Jenny, and we're continuing our work in Unit 3 by calculating the projected cash flow in problem 12-22. So let's look at this problem and see if we can set it up. By far, the most difficult thing is setting up the projected cash flows, calculating them. The net present value, the profitability index, and the IRR are all things that I think you should be able to do. But let's get started. First of all, as we look through the problem, one of the things I always like to do is to lay out the facts. And so we see that we have a life on the new asset expected to be over 5 years. We have the cost of the new plant and equipment of $14,800, but the shipping and installation cost of $200,000 must be included in that. So we're actually talking about $15 million here. We have a variable cost per unit of $140 and the annual fixed cost of $700,000. The depreciation method is straight line with no salvage. We have an initial incremental net working capital of $200,000. A marginal tax rate of 34 and a required rate of return of 15, and that's the amount we'll need when we get to the net present value. Now the more difficult part of this is that we have a varying amount of unit sales. So as I click in here, and somehow I just clicked on another sheet, so hold on just a second, okay. As I click in here, you're going to see that our unit sales vary, the number of units vary each year, and that we have a unit price that stays the same for the first 4 years and then decreases in year 5. We can calculate our revenues just by taking our unit number of units times the unit price and get our revenues across there. We can do the same thing with our variable cost by taking the 140 that we see here per unit times the number of units. And actually I'm going to say just units here. I think it'll be easier. We can, if you'll notice here, our fixed costs remain the same all the way across. And then our depreciation is based on a, essentially, if I go up here and click in here, it's just based on the cost of the 15 million, the zero salvage, and a 5-year life. So I'm using the depreciation function in Excel to do that. Then to come up with our net operating income, we're just taking our revenue, subtracting those things to come up with our net operating income. Our tax rate is just 34% of the NOI. It's not 34% of the revenue, it's 34% of the net operating income. We subtract that out, come up with our what they call NOPAT, net operating profit after taxes, and then we're going to add back our depreciation. Remember, depreciation is a non-cash expense, and that's why we're adding it back in. That gives us our initial operating cash flow, but we have, this problem is really a little odd. Because it talks about that you're going to have a working capital amount equal to 10% of the dollar value of the sales for that year, and that it is a cumulative amount. Essentially, it will increase during years 1 through 3, and then decrease, and then all of it is liquidated at the termination of the project at the end of year 5. So all the amount that is left is going to be rolled back into the project. So, you know, when I looked at this, I think it's kind of hard to understand what they're asking for. So that's one reason I worked on this problem with you. It's pretty easy to figure out what's going on in the first year. We're just saying 200. But when we're coming up in year 1, with the 2100, essentially what we're saying is that we've already got 200 in here. We need an accumulated amount of 2100. Therefore, we only need $1,900 down here. Same thing here. In year 2, we need 3600. And the way I got this amount is just 10% of the sale amount. But since I already have 2100, I only need to add 1500 down here for the additional working capital. Here, I've already got 3,600 at the end of year 2 accumulated, so 3,600, I don't need to add any more to that. And remember, the additional working capital is usually to handle the inventory. So then in year 4, you'll notice that my units have gone down from 120 to 80,000 here. So we see our working capital has reduced. We can actually plow that money back into our funds here. And then in year 5, we don't have any working capital requirement because this is the year it winds down. So that means we get back that entire $22,400,000. So that ends up giving us what we call our free cash flow that we have across here. And so this is normally we would have this more in a column and not in a horizontal fashion, but you can do net present value either way. So essentially this is the same thing that we've done before, using our net present value formula, and then if you look up in here, our rate of 15%, and then these amounts, the M32, N32, and so on, are all separated by commas, because you have to do that for net present value. And then you have you're going to actually add your initial output of 15.2, because remember, it's showing up as a negative number. That's why we have to do that. So we have our net present value here showing us the 17 million. And then what you would continue to do then is that you would end up working on your internal rate of return and so on. And remember, internal rate of return is pretty easy. You're just using the IRR formula and taking your values all the way across, and then you can put in your guess. I don't know, I'll just put something silly, which I know that's not it, so let's put 20%. And essentially we can find our internal rate of return. If we need to carry it to decimals, you can just add a couple of decimals there to see, but this would be our internal rate of return calculation. So that is huge. So this would definitely be something that we would consider investing in. I always caution you, though, whenever you're working on this, you know, when you see that large of investments, it's almost too good to be true that's that good of an internal rate of return. I definitely want to make sure and look at the marketing information on this problem to make sure that this is something that we feel comfortable that it would really happen. And you notice they do call this a fad project, so I assume that they realize it does have a limited life. So that gives you an idea of how to set this up. I don't know, you probably would have had everything fine until you got down to this net working capital. I think it was a little confusing in the problem, so I'm hoping that by covering it here for you, then you aren't going to be frustrated when you're working on it in the My Finance Lab. So this is Dr. Jenny signing off until I talk to you on the next video. Thanks for stopping by.